1950s, inspiring the movie quiz show, has died. He was 93. Van Doren died of natural causes Tuesday at a care center for the elderly in Canaan, Connecticut. Van Doren was the central figure in the TV game show scandals of the late 50s and eventually pleaded guilty to perjury for lying to a grand jury that investigated them. He made 14 electrifying appearances on 21 in late 1956 and early 1957, beating 13 competitors and winning a then record $129,000 because the show producers provided him with the answers. Following the quiz show scandal, he also wrote and published several books, including the top-selling How to Read a book along with Mortimer Adler, also The Joy of Reading, and A History of Knowledge, Past, Present, and Future.
Bob Dylan's Whiskey Project in downtown Nashville, to coincide with the 50th anniversary of his Nashville Skyline album, will be about a lot more than just booze. Dylan is set to open a whiskey distillery in fall of 2020 under the brand Heaven's Door. And as part of that project, will transform a 160-year-old Elm Street church into the Heaven's Door Distillery and Center for the Arts. It'll feature the distillery, a whiskey library, a restaurant, and a 360-seat live performance venue, and it'll all be...
You will now be placed into conference.
Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in about 10 minutes. Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in about 5 minutes. Jolena, I see you are dialed in. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Good morning. Eddie Reyes has joined.
Good morning, Eddie. This is Dorothy.
Hey, Dorothy. Just confirming, our conference call is still on, right? The other one that got canceled is not this one.
The other one that got canceled.
Yeah, there was a email that came out earlier this morning about a VITA conference call getting canceled. I don't think it's this one.
No.
Okay.
Somebody's cuckoo clock is 2 minutes past. Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to go ahead and check to make sure I had all of our committee members present. Eddie, you checked in, and to answer your question about the other VITA call that got canceled, you may be referring to the grant committee. That was
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Eddie and Jolena have checked in. JR, I see you on WebEx.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Christian? Are you with us this morning, Christian?
And I've just joined in. This is Brian Hyatt with the Tazewell County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate that. Joe, are you on the bridge yet?
This is Joe Lurch. Vaco.
Good morning, Joe. Christian, are you on the bridge yet? Well, hopefully he'll be joining us momentarily. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the call this morning. This is the first virtual meeting of the NG9-1-1 Sustainable Funding Committee. I want to thank all of the committee members in advance for all of your hard work. As you know, the purpose of this committee is to provide recommendations on how to mitigate the financial burden of reoccurring NG9-1 costs on localities. This is an ISP committee, so the recommendations that you will be developing will be coming to me, and I will include these recommendations in a report that we will compile together and present to the 911 Services Board. Hopefully this will occur at their July meeting. As I'm doing today, I will be facilitating the meeting, but I have a co-lead in this endeavor, Ms. Jolena Young. Jolena is representing the 911 Services Board, and I'm going to turn things over to her right now so she can welcome everyone and provide comments. Jolena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dorothy. So I do want to thank everyone for agreeing to participate on the committee. I raised this concern after discussions with several PSAP managers in both 4th and 6th region. So I think it is, I know we have a funding process, but there's two things that stand out to me. With a 40% increase in cost almost statewide, it may be time to look at, is our revenue stream, is it time to increase our revenue stream, and what's the possibility of that? Secondly, is the traditional way we have distributed funding still the best solution going forward? So not a decision that I want to make, and I don't think Dorothy wants to make that alone. So we felt that it was time to go out and get some feedback from the PSAP community. So again, thank you all for agreeing to participate.
Thank you, Jolena. So moving on to today's agenda. As you can see, we have a fairly light agenda. Our focus is mostly on level setting. However, even though this is an ISP meeting, it is still being conducted as a public meeting for transparency, and I have included an opportunity, as you can see at the end of the agenda, for non-committee members to provide comments. We will also be recording the meeting, and we'll make the recording available on the webpage that we've created for this committee for anyone to go back and listen to the meeting or to view the meeting presentation.
And Dorothy, just one question for you. Do we have a quorum today to approve the charter?
Yes, we do have a quorum today.
Okay, thank you.
So moving on to introductions. Since I sent out the reminder for today's meeting, I've heard from both VML and VACO. When I put together the presentation, I had not yet heard from these organizations, but we do have both a VML and a VACO representative. The VML representative is Terry Hall, and the VACO representative is Joe Lurch. Terry was unable to participate in today's call, but we do have Joe Lurch participating. Terry is the director for the York, Coast, and Williamsburg 9-1-1 Center, for those of you who do not know him. And Mr. Lurch is the director of local government policy for VACO. And I should have an update on the industry representatives by tomorrow. So if we could start off and have the committee members introduce themselves. So Christian, if you are on the bridge, why don't you start off introductions?
All right, I'm Christian Foster with the Matthews County PSAP. I have been in 911 for 20 plus years. I've been the manager here for 4.
Thanks, Christian. It sounded like somebody was trying to make a comment right before Christian introduced himself. We'll move on to JR.
Hey, sure, Dorothy. Hi, this is J.R. Powell. I'm the director with the Martinsville-Henry County 911 Center. Been here at the center for 23 years, and look forward to working with the committee on this very important topic. I know there's going to be a lot of PSAP directors as well as city managers and county administrators that's going to be paying attention to the outcome of this committee. So I look forward to working with everybody on that.
Thanks, JR. Eddie?
Thank you, Dorothy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eddie Reyes. I'm currently the director of Prince William County's PSAP. I've been in public safety. November will be my 30-year anniversary. I retired as the senior deputy chief of police in Alexandria, Virginia, and I ran the PSAP there as one of my tours of duty. Very glad to be on this committee. Thank you, Dorothy.
Thanks, Eddie. Sheriff, hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Hyatt?
Yes, that's right, Sheriff Hyatt. My name is Brian Hyatt, and I'm the sheriff in Tazewell County, Virginia. I've been sheriff here for 8 years, and here our 911 Center and Sheriff's Offices together. And so I appreciate being able to be involved in this, and hopefully I will learn a lot of interesting things as well.
I'm sure you will. Thank you very much for your participation. Jolene, I know you provided opening remarks, but would you like to tell everybody about your role with Twin County?
So I am the 911 coordinator for Twin County, which is Carroll County, Grayson County, and City of Galax. We dispatch for about a little under 1,000 square miles, and I've been in the job 8 years, so I feel like a baby to the rest of you guys. I also am a member of a member of the 911 Services Board, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve on that and try to represent the PSAP community there.
Thanks, Jolena. And JR had said in his introductory remarks that local government is paying very close attention to this committee, and I certainly share and echo those comments. We wanted to make sure that we had local government representation. That was the reason for making sure that we had a VML and VACO representative. Terry Hall was unable to make this morning's call, but we do have Joe Lurch from VACO. Joe, do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. So Joe Lurch, Director of Local Government Policy for VACO, and I am the staff person that helps develop our policy and our legislative positions as it relates to 911, next generation. And, you know, in the past, we've taken some positions in supporting, you know, adequate funding for this transition to next generation 911. And so this process, I think, will help inform our membership as we develop our legislative and policy positions for the upcoming session. I say upcoming session, but in 2020.
Thanks, Joe. We're glad to have you. So what I'm going to do now, and hopefully I can do it fairly gracefully, is transition from the PowerPoint presentation to our discussion on the charter. I have provided committee members with a copy of the charter. It has been updated to reflect current members. The charter document was put together to enable the committee to get to work as soon as possible. Jolena has had an opportunity to look at the document, and as I said, this was sent out to committee members. It's also available from the Funding Committee's webpage on the ISP website. So I'm hoping that everyone has had an opportunity to take a look at the document as well. My main concern moving forward from today's meeting is that we have consensus on the among committee members on the description and scope that's included in the charter document, and that we believe we can complete our deliverable in time for the July meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the charter document. And I didn't quite do that as gracefully as I wanted to, so I will do it the old-fashioned way and just close the PowerPoint and bring this up. So hopefully everybody can see the charter document now.
I can, Dorothy.
Pardon?
I'm now seeing that.
Great, wonderful. So what I'll do, Jolene, if it's okay with you, is kind of move through the document and see if we have comments and consensus from committee members.
Yes, I agree.
So the first part of the charter document includes the basic information about the committee, the name of the committee, the effective dates of the committee. As we talked about earlier, our goal is to complete a report for the board and have that report delivered to the board at their July meeting. So the effective dates for the committee are running from April through July. That was my best guess. If we need to push that out, we certainly can. But the work of this committee is important, and I would like to see us compile that report as soon as possible. We have next the members of the committee listed, and they're in no particular order other than I was just replacing the representative agency with the individual. So we still have an industry person that's yet to be determined. I should hear back hopefully by tomorrow for that person, and then they should be joining us for our next call. The facilitators of this committee, your co-leaders, will be Ms. Jolena Young and myself. So now we're going to move on into more of the substance of the charter document. So hopefully you can see the executive summary. I've got the first paragraph here at the top of the screen. I can't quite get all of the executive summary onto the screen, but I can move through it once everybody's had a chance to take a look at that first paragraph. So any comments from the committee in terms of the executive summary? Were you surprised to see anything here? Was anything omitted that you had hoped to see? and I will assume no comment means consensus. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move through to the second page, which has the remainder of the executive summary, and then also includes the purpose and the business needs. And we've mentioned several times already on this call that the purpose of the committee is to provide recommendations to the board on how to mitigate the financial burden of recurring NG9-1-1 costs on localities. So that brings us to the description and scope section of the charter. And as I said, it's very important that we have consensus moving forward on this section if we're going to be successful in our endeavor. So first, we want to make sure that we have the right mix of committee members. So you see the representatives listed here. This was Jolina's attempt at providing a good cross-section of the 911 stakeholder community. And since we are a industry that is well adapted to acronyms, I should have gone ahead and spelled out what some of these stand for. So VACO is the Virginia Association of Counties. The second VML is Virginia Municipal League. And the third VSA is the Virginia Sheriff's Association.
Dorothy, the only concern I'll raise here is not so much obviously for our PSAP because we represent both police and fire and rescue, but just do you think there may be any concern from the fire rescue community that they may not be represented here for the smaller PSAPs? Because I know there's a lot of PSAPs throughout the Commonwealth that, you know, are either primary or secondary that are fire rescue only. And so I know there's obviously a good representation of almost every other industry, but I just raise that on their behalf.
So noted. What do other committee members think? Do we need somebody to speak specifically to the fire rescue group?
Dorothy, this is Christian. Being with the small PSAP, we also represent fire rescue as well. I think that with the three PSAP representatives that we have, that I think we could probably cover that.
Dorothy, this is JR as well, representing the medium PSAP, and we also dispatch for police, fire, and rescue here as well.
Perfect. I just wanted to get that confirmation, Dorothy, because I didn't want to forget about my brothers in red and my sisters in red.
No, I appreciate that. There's enough work to go around. We want to make sure we have everybody we need at the table. So moving on in the description and the scope section, we'll be talking about the meeting schedule, actually setting the date later in the presentation this morning, but I wanted to confirm that we're all comfortable approaching this from a virtual perspective and that we will not plan to do any in-person meetings, that we will conduct virtual meetings about every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And just like we're doing today, I'll organize the meetings and send out the agenda, the conference code and WebEx information, and in consultation with Jolina to make sure that we've captured all of the agenda items. And committee members, I mean, please feel free if you don't agenda or you have a specific item that you wish to discuss, just let me know, let Jolina know, and we'll make sure that those items are included on the agenda. So this next section right here, Jolina put together in terms of how to go about obtaining the information and the data that we're going to need to make those recommendations. And I'm actually going to switch back to the PowerPoint in a couple of minutes, and we can talk more about these specific questions. But this is really the crux of our scope in terms of leveraging these questions to do the research that we're going to need so committee members feel comfortable they have the information and data from which to draw from to make those recommendations. And then the end of the document is right here, the deliverable and the expected outcome. So the deliverable is that report, hopefully in time for the July board meeting, and then the outcome is to provide options and strategies for the board to consider as a means to mitigate the financial burden of reoccurring NG9-1-1 costs on localities. Does this document seem reasonable to the committee? Does it address everything that you were hoping to get out of the committee work? Anything that was left off?
Joe Lurch, just a question. Maybe we'll get into it when we're discussing more of the data, but on the first question, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, what is the likelihood of increasing wireless 911 revenue? I assume that's kind of an open-ended question, and it has somewhat of a legislative direction toward it, because it would take the legislature to make a decision on identifying a revenue stream, correct?
That is absolutely correct, yes. So the committee would provide the recommendation, and then it would go back to the board for consideration as part of their legislative agenda.
Okay. Just one suggestion on that, and maybe you're already thinking in these terms, is take the existing work of a 2015 study that the legislature mandated that Department of Tax do on looking at the communication sales use tax, and they actually came up with specific recommendations, the group that was put together, that would add potential revenue to come back to the PSAPs.
That's a good suggestion if the committee does go in that direction. Thank you. So since we're talking about the questions, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the presentation so we can talk about those questions. So in order to gather the necessary information and data, Jolena has put together a survey. The survey is still in draft format, but as I said, the goal is by answering these questions, we have the information, or the committee is in a good position and has the information and data that they need to make recommendations. So at this point, Jolena, I'm going to turn it back to you so you can talk a little bit more about that survey and the questions.
Okay, and so do we want to talk about these questions and then accept the charter, or go ahead and accept the charter and then talk about the process of getting the data, the responses to our questions?
We can do it either way, whatever your preference is.
So, well, I'll quickly go through the thought process of gathering some of the data to help us reach our scope. So on the likelihood, so my thought is we need the input of the PSAP community. So the best way to do that, unfortunately, is to send out a survey. But I don't think we've sent out one recently, and I think this is near and dear to the PSAP's day-to-day operations. So I don't think they will mind completing one in this case. and it's more just to get their input, so it's not going to be a huge intensive exercise for them where they have to go find a lot of data, I don't think. But on the likelihood of increasing 911 revenue, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is, can we increase the rate on individuals' cell phone and landline phones, the 911 tax. But there are some jurisdictions that I think are looking at other means, which would include, maybe taxing on a per transaction basis. So if we went through the process of changing legislation to enable those types of revenue generating means, are there PSAPs out there that would actually utilize those? The other thing is, how do Virginia PSAPs think discretionary funding should be used? So we have a percentage that is sent out monthly, and then we have a percentage that goes into the grant fund. So if we could, an option is we change the percentage so that PSAPs get more on a monthly basis, or we change it the other way so there's more discretionary funds, or we leave it the same. But while we're going out and getting information from the PSAPs, I think it's a good chance and opportunity to just revalidate the current priorities. So, currently 911 call handling equipment is first priority, et cetera. Do the PSAPs agree that, that's where they need the funding, or are there other items that they would like to receive funding for? And then finally, is there a desire to consolidate among Virginia PSAPs, but personnel are unsure of how to proceed? It's getting more expensive to run a PSAP, so but it's a huge undertaking to consolidate, and that can be either physical, or it can just be you want to do an equipment sharing arrangement. So are there PSAPs that are willing to look at some physical or technological sharing, but they would need assistance to do that? And a question I've always had is, we have 111 call handling equipments across the state. If we could do that with less, are there jurisdictions that are willing? So that's an example of, some of the consolidation that I would like to just put out there and ask the PSAPs, are you willing to maybe change the way you operate slightly if it would reduce the overall cost burden to the state?
I don't know what that means.
So right now we have 121 call handling equipment. Some states have 4. So if it would reduce the cost for the entire state, would our jurisdictions willing to look at more equipment sharing?
I would imagine, so long as it doesn't involve or it doesn't reduce the quality of service we provide.
And I get that feedback from a lot of jurisdictions.
So, Jolena, in talking about that, are you talking about consolidating call taking and then leaving radio operations up to the jurisdiction, or what are your thoughts on that?
So there's several different approaches to that. It could be that we go to more shared equipment. So, for instance, I share equipment with Bland with county, and then 2 secondary PSAPs, which we pay for separately. I know JR and his jurisdiction are looking at possibly doing a sharing arrangement with 3 other PSAPs. So if we could reduce call handling equipment from 120 down to a much lower number, there would be a cost savings potentially.
So, Jolena, this is Eddie Reyes. When you say 120 call handling equipment, is that the equivalent of PSAPs, or are you talking about vendors? Because I'm not clear.
That would be.
Asked.
Yeah, currently most PSAPs in Virginia have their own individual call handling equipment.
Right, but it could be the same vendor across the Commonwealth, right, with a lot of those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So how would that work if I was going to share call handling equipment with another locality?
So with hopefully eventually with the EZNet, you would have connectivity. So and I don't want to go too far down into this today. It's just a question that we want to raise with the PSAP, so we'll have to be clear on it. But for us, myself, I have what they call host A of the server. With County has host B, and then Bland County is actually a remote off of that. And then we have an EZNet or a wide area network between the 3 sites that manage the call traffic amongst the 3 jurisdictions.
Okay.
And if you do not think that that's appropriate for this particular discussion, or it's going to blow the scope out too much, we can take that out. But it's always bothered me that I felt that we might be more efficient as a state if we did if we did collaborate on some of that equipment.
I agree with that, but go ahead, JR.
Oh, I was just going to toss in there. I think you hit on one of the things you were mentioning, Jolena, was the discussion of the EZNet. And I do think that's a conversation definitely for this committee regarding ongoing funding and charges for next generation 911, because as we're moving forward with this, I know a lot of the discussion amongst the other centers across the Commonwealth has been, what are we going to be allowed to use that EZNet for in the future? That is a big cost savings towards the localities. We mentioned the consolidation of call handling equipment as one of the discussions, and you're right. Martinsville Henry County is currently in discussion with a couple of other PSAPs in regards to a shared call handling project, and I got some potential numbers, just some initial numbers back. Nothing finalized or anything, but one thing that really is discouraging on these types of projects, sharing projects, is the network connectivity that's required, especially when you're getting up into the medium and larger size PSAPs, and the requirements for bandwidth and connectivity and redundancy. The question keeps coming up, can we use that EZNet to do some of these shared projects, which would be a huge savings and a really big boost, I think, of encouragement and interest in moving forward with shared projects or that sort of thing. So just thought I'd toss that out there. I think that EZNet is a good point of discussion for this committee. Just my thoughts.
Okay, and we may need to reword that when we get into actually going out to try to get input around that. But thank you, JR.
So this is Joe Lurch. Going back to the revenue question, you mentioned the 911 tax. Is the survey going to ask the individual PSAPs whether they'd want to have the ability to raise the 911 tax locally? I didn't quite understand the thought process there.
So, yes. So part of it is just asking, would your jurisdiction support, if the board did recommend legislation, would your region support that legislative process? Because we know right now that is a statewide collection and not a individual jurisdiction. So it's looking at, is that something that would be supported across the state by PSAP managers and the finance directors. The other part of it is the tax is one way. If we got a lot of resistance to raising the tax rate on individual bills, are there other ways that jurisdictions might be able to increase revenue? And, one way would be a per-service fee, either tacked on through the EMS charge or billed separately. And would jurisdictions take advantage of that if that revenue generation option was presented and passed in legislation?
I got it. Well, one thought while we're on this is maybe to also include in the questionnaire, and this goes back to my comment about the 2015 study, because it didn't look specifically at the ability for localities to raise revenue independent of the state, but it looked at the modernization of the CSUT, and one of the things it noted was that the at least on the communication sales use tax, the current exemption for prepaid phone service, that may be having an impact or is having an impact on the overall CSUT revenues. I think in the study it showed over a 3-year period, I think from 2012 to 2014, the growth in the E9-1-1 tax on those was up by like about 18%. And in the same period, the landline, the postpaid, the growth was only 1.8%. So that might be something to think about. And the other thing I'll throw in there is that, in 2007, I believe it was the General Assembly had made the decision to, the state to have kind of just collect the local CSUT, at one place and not have it be differentiated by locality. So I throw that in there, and I know we don't have an industry rep yet, but I think there might be some pushback from that. And so I think having the ability in a questionnaire to give various options, whether it be an increase in state revenue that could be apportioned back to localities through the normal process, or the ability for a locality to raise it locally.
Yes, and I think that's a very good recommendation on how we word that section and the types of questions that we include in that section. That's right on target with my thinking.
Jolene, I'm wondering, and this is Dorothy, if we need to maybe change the word likelihood, because that's sort of putting it more in a decision format. Maybe we need to look at it more from a desired outcome or a willingness, just to gauge the temperature for that.
Yes, I'm happy to change that wording.
And then based on some of the other comments I heard, I'm wondering if from a consolidation, I know we said physical or technological, but what I heard in some of the questions was getting at services, particularly hosted services, and maybe expanding that question to include services as well.
Yes.
Dorothy, along those lines, this is Joe Lurch again. On that first question, one of the thoughts I had is maybe instead of trying to answer a question of likelihood, because I think each everybody will have their own guess as to what the legislature might approve or not approve. Maybe it's more about what are potential options for increasing wireless 911 revenue. I mean, that's kind of, to me, that kind of seems more of the scope of what this charter could provide, or this committee is, hey, here are some options for doing this.
Okay.
Jolena, this is Brian. I know, like, our county was trying to find different funding to help with our fire, rescue, law enforcement, and then they tried to increase the meals tax because a county, for restaurants out in the county, has to increase it by vote, whereas a town can vote by their council or city managers. But I know we tried that, and the vote went down for us. So we were looking for ways to try to help with all of our emergency services and things. So I think a county like ours would want to do what they could to help with the funding, just trying to figure out how to do it or what type of revenue to pull from.
Yeah, and Brian, I'd agree with Joe Lurch again, and maybe that could be part of the questionnaire. Would, the option be, would counties, as a part of an option for funding this, want the ability to have the same authority as a city or town as it relates to meals tax?
Yeah, that would be good, because if we had that same authority for what just happened at our last election, then the board was all for it, and they would have passed it, and that would have helped the fire departments and things get more equipment and our agency and everything. But they don't have that authority like the towns do for whatever reason, the way it's wrote.
So I think, those recommended changes we can change the high-level wording and then incorporate some of those specific questions into the survey.
Okay.
Jolena, so if it's agreeable with you, what I would suggest is let's work on revising in the scope section of the charter, revise those questions so from a high level they are broad enough to address the feedback that we've received today. And then that'll help us flesh out that draft that you provided for the survey questions, which means...
Well, had I not had 6 years and listened to say my name, I wouldn't have heard it speak. I did a never call for that one.
For those of you who are participating remotely, if you could mute your line
downtown here.
We're hearing a conversation.
Sunday. Yeah, that one. Yeah, they come and get it for me, but I don't know,
Everyone, if you're not speaking, can you mute your lines? We're hearing some background noise, a conversation going on. Thank you. Okay, so Jolena, why don't you and I sit down and take another pass at those questions and then the related survey, and then we can move approval of the charter off to our next meeting. That will give Terry an opportunity to take a look at it, and the industry representatives to take a look at it as well to see if they have some input.
I think that is fine, Dorothy, and that also will give the members, if once they've reviewed the charter, if they have specific changes they would like to see incorporated, if they shoot those to you and myself, then we can incorporate any of those for the next review as well.
Great. So moving on to the next slide, which is very much related to the discussion that we were just having. What else do we need to do as far as research or analysis to achieve our goals and produce the committee's deliverables? So we talked about the questions. We talked about reworking them and making sure that the survey questions relate directly to those broadly worded questions. Some of the feedback that I heard that would go under the to-do list here is to look at maybe shared equipment scenarios that we should address both from a governance and a funding perspective, and to try to come up with maybe some type of efficiency metric. There were a couple of comments about leveraging the ESI net for hosted services, and all of this is very timely because we're going to be undertaking the next edition of the 911 Comprehensive Plan. So we're starting another planning initiative, so this feedback will be very helpful in that initiative as well. We also need to look at, related to the ESI net, the network connectivity piece, and how we can, that can be leveraged for shared projects, maybe getting at some type of efficiency recommendation there as well.
And I think we definitely want to look at the 2015 tax study and their recommendations.
Yeah, and to that, this is Joe Lurch again. It might be worth seeing if the tax commissioner or somebody in tax might be willing to help update just some of the data on that, particularly as it relates to the prepaid. They had the transactions, I think, from 2012 to 2014. If they might be able to provide a few more years' worth of data, that would be, I think, really informative.
Agreed. And then one thing that I had thought of related to not just this discussion here about the recurring NG9-1-1 costs, but comparing that to the funding recalculation that we did at the end, or we did at the end of fiscal year 2018. So on July 1st, 2018, we moved to a new funding formula, and that funding formula it's designed to be better aligned with the way that NG9-1-1 solution providers will calculate reoccurring costs. In other words, we moved to a more population-based model as well to match the population-based model that providers will be using to calculate reoccurring costs. I thought it might be useful to take a look at the funding formula recalculation and compare it to our reoccurring cost estimates to see if there's consistency between increases and decreases when we compare the results of the new funding formula and estimated reoccurring costs. So I would assume that localities that have a high population, there would be an increase in the funding formula and reoccurring costs, and then a decrease for the opposite. But that's just a thought. It would be very useful to actually have that analysis to be able to see what's going on there and to be able to identify any trends or anomalies. Any other thoughts from the committee in terms of items we should be looking at, analysis, research?
Dorothy, this is Joe. So based on what you just said, is that looking at, because I'm looking at the chart that I have before me that shows the overall annual increase in monthly recurring costs estimated, and I guess this was done last fall. Mm-hmm. So are you talking about updating that chart maybe with more recent estimates based on, what the cost would be?
Right. Yes, updating that chart,
okay.
But also comparing it to the recurring cost estimates that were contained in localities' migration proposals. And this might be a good time to just stop and talk about why there was concern among the 911 community members as to the projected or the concern about the increase in in reoccurring costs. When the board approved the NG9-1-1 deployment plan, they directed staff to prepare NG9-1-1 migration proposals for 124 PSAPs that were based on the AT&T solution. So these migration proposals looked at a whole host of areas within the PSAP. One of the items that was included in the migration proposal for each PSAP was an estimate of the reoccurring costs for the AT&T solution. Now, the board has agreed to pay the delta between the current monthly reoccurring costs for the legacy solution and the monthly NG9-1-1 solution for 2 years after deployment. So we'll capture that, or the board would pay for that delta of increased costs. However, when the migration proposals were done, we, ISP staff, noticed that there, for some PSAPs, there was a 2- or 3-fold increase in their reoccurring costs. And that caused a great deal of concern for those PSAPs and within the 911 community. So as Jolena was talking about in her opening remarks, that was sort of the impetus to pull this committee together to start looking at reoccurring costs. So getting back to what I was saying with that spreadsheet is take a look at the funding formula and see if it aligns or doesn't align with what we're seeing in terms of reoccurring costs for one particular NG9-1-1 solutions provider.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. In fact, when we did a podcast with Steve back in December, I mean, he mentioned, to our listeners that there may be some modifications to that chart based on, that the estimated migration cost and what it's actually costing.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We're only talking about estimates right now.
So I agree, Dorothy, that it would be helpful to marry up the recurring cost, the projected recurring cost, to the funding distributions and see how those align.
We will do that. Any other thoughts in terms of research analysis? Well, if committee members have any additional thoughts or suggestions, please let Jolena or me know, and we will start working on that. And all of the information that we will be producing, we have created an ISP webpage for the funding committee, and all presentations and resource materials will be uploaded to that page. So committee members will have access to it there. We'll send it to you directly, but you would also have access to it via the funding committee webpage, and members of the 911 community, general public, will also have access to that information from that webpage.
Okay. Well, what you did today with the PowerPoint and having everything ready to be printed out and all, I know you put a lot of work into it, and it made it so easy for us to just follow along and watch everything going on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, Dorothy. We do appreciate all your effort.
Well, technology is wonderful when it works, so thank you. So moving on to our last agenda item, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time, is to talk about the meeting schedule. I know our charter indicates a virtual meeting approach and getting together every 2 weeks. My question to the group is, should we keep Thursday at 11 a.m. as our meeting time? I'm fine with that. If we do that, our next meeting would be on April the 25th, but carrying that same schedule into May is going to get problematic because of the upcoming Virginia NENA conference and some other things that we've got going on around the state. So what's the committee's pleasure in terms of meeting schedule and next meeting date and time?
This is Brian, and the 25th works fine for me.
I'm good with the 25th.
Yes, Joe, I'm good with the 25th.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Anyone else? Remember.
Dorothy, this is Eddie Reyes. I'll be at a ICP conference in Florida, but I'll do my best to join in from that location.
Thank you.
And Dorothy's JR, the 25th is good for me.
Okay. We're about ready to wrap up, and before we do, I wanted to ask if there was any non-committee members participating on the call that had comments. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and conclude today's call. Thank you, everyone, for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Dorothy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.